Welcome into the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Group of Five Deep Dive. We are continuing with preview season, loading up Conference USA, the same conference that sent a team to the New Year's Six last year. I don't really know. I don't have the box score in front of me. I guess good things happen to Liberty. We'll get into it. Can they do it again? Is there any team to feel good about other than Liberty in this conference? We are going to leave no stone left unturned. We're going to give you our win totals, our odds to win Conference USA, as well as some long shots to make the college football playoff. We're going to get into all of it here in the CUSA. I am joined by Colin Wilson and Mike Iannello to break it all down for you. We're also going to toss in two bonus teams. We got the non-Notre Dame independents. That's UMass. That's UConn. We're going to do our best to give them some love as well. Colin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. We're in the middle of podcast season. I love it when I get to come down to the G5 level and talk about some of these JUCO transfers, style changes, coaches we've never heard of, like people that were just playing 5 years ago. I think we have a defensive coordinator that's 29 years old on this podcast. This conference is hilarious. I can't wait.
Iannello, how you doing?
Hilarious is one word I would use. Depressing would probably be another one. I'm excited for this pod because when I was going through my notes, I'll be honest, I have one bet written down. So I'm hoping that you guys will talk me into some. I think it's a very difficult, interesting, fun, hilarious, depressing, whatever word you want to use, conference there's 7 teams with a win total of 4.5. So you're I usually, when I'm picking an over, I want, give me 3 for sure wins, and then you got to hope 2 coin flips go your way to get to 5. Every team in this conference has 1 sure win, 1 sure loss in 10 coin flip games. I was looking. 7 of the 10 teams in this conference are in Colin Wilson's bottom 20 power rating in the country. 7 of these teams are in the bottom 20 of his power ratings, including the 2 worst teams in the country. So it is just a lot of hogwash, and we're going to see who comes out on top.
2 quick notes before we get into it. Welcome to the party, Kennesaw State. They are the 134th FBS team. They've only been around since 2015, so if you're not familiar with the Owls, get ready to meet them. And one other note, I know I said it, tongue-in-cheek, Liberty getting blasted 45-6 in the Fiesta Bowl by Oregon, but I'm not going to stand here and listen to all the G5 slander from the casuals, from people that just cover the Power Four and say they don't belong at the table. You know what? If you're going to look at last year, you need to look at the 10 years of the 14 college football playoff, because the G5 champion, the one who got the auto bid, went 4-6 in those big bowl games. And when you go through it, 2014 Boise State, 2015 Houston, 2017 UCF, 2022 Tulane, those teams could all play. And when you look at some of the other losses, there were 3 one-possession losses as well. UCF against LSU, Western Michigan against Wisconsin, and Cincinnati against Georgia. So to me, I understand that there is a big drop-off. I'm not asking for multiple G5 teams in the playoff, but I think there's a very good chance that somewhere in G5 land, we're going to have a champion that's really good this year and is going to throw a scare into somebody in the first round. Now, before we get into Conference USA in earnest, we do have one special announcement to make.
What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stuckey.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
So let's start at the very top of the conference with the defending champion. They ran through the regular season undefeated, won in the rematch against New Mexico State, punched their ticket to the Fiesta Bowl. That, of course, is the Liberty Flames, coached up by Jamie Chadwell. And when you look at this team, their win total is off the charts, 10.5. So essentially you get 1 mulligan if you go with the over. Outside of that, you're going to need them to either have a perfect season, or maybe we'll get into it. Maybe there's some potholes on the schedule. I couldn't find too many. Conference USA title, -195. The only one that I've seen thus far with negative juice on it. that speaks to the bottom half, the bottom 3/4 of Conference USA to make the college football playoff plus 440. Starts with Caden Salter. He's the perfect trigger man for this offense. He can run, he can pass, he can essentially buy time and find people downfield. Chadwell is someone who game plans at such an elite level that it seems like between him and Salter, they're always making the right choice. They're always getting people in space, getting mismatches. So I love that for them this year. Cooley also back at running back. Their receiving core, I wouldn't say full on decimated, but we got some new faces. Dante Lee comes up from Division II Shaw. He had scholarship offers from some ACC programs. He could be a burner, not just at receiver, but also in the return game. And finally, let's look at this defense, because this is where I think the pivot is in this conversation. And I'm going to bring Colin in first. 101st in rushing success defense last year, 99th in red zone defense touchdown in terms of the touchdown rate that they allowed. And they gave up 62 plays of 20 plus yards, which was 94th in the country. So defense that returns 5 starters, secondary breaking in 3 new starters. Is anyone in Conference USA positioned to take advantage of a potentially leaky defense?
No, and that is the bad thing about this podcast. Nobody in this conference is going to have a shot to beat this team. My problem with Liberty is price. Listen, they return everything in the world. Every unit is going to be the #1 unit in Conference USA. What they have on offense, you mentioned Caden Salter already. Quentin Cooley is an absolute wrecking ball. He had 16 TDs. He's back. And then on the defensive side, they have 8 players that should win all team first all team Conference USA, amazing levels from the defensive line back to the secondary. There is so much loaded on this. And then you look at their schedule. I mean, double-digit favorites in 11 games, coin flip against App State. So what's the conversation we're going to have? Because we might as well get the Liberty, thing out of the way before we start dumpster diving, searching for the rest of the conference, see who's going to join them in the conference championship. There is absolutely no doubt this team is going to be in the conference championship here. They are too talented to lose 2 in this conference. And I think the market is, you're just going to have to search and find good value, because the over 10.5 minus 125 has minimal value. I project this at 11 wins. So when you get extra juice on a 10.5, then you're actually paying for that. Although I can't find a second loss if they were to lose to App State here. So you look at other factors. Can they make the college football playoff at plus 440 after getting waxed by Oregon? Don't think for a second the committee is not going to look at Liberty and maybe pass them over because of how bad of a quality football game. And Fiesta Bowl officials were not real happy with that either. So do they get passed over, especially if they lose to App State? Now, if they finish undefeated, I still think they could get passed over. Maybe not. So the best bet for me, by the way, they're 50% to win this conference. They should not have a number out there over minus 110. So any minus 165, all these other numbers, you can't buy it. I mean, you can buy it if you want. You want to lock that up all season, that's fine. Horrible investment, horrible return of investment, horrible way to lock your money up. Just go put it in gold or some shit for 3 months. I mean, it's one of the worst numbers out there, but they know that everybody wants to bet this Liberty team. So what do? If you don't think that they can make the playoff with an undefeated record, and there's only a couple shops that have undefeated out there, and they don't usually list Liberty because they got whacked last year. But I think what you want to do is say, that App State game is a huge hurdle for both teams to make it to the college football playoff. To me, it is a play-in game from two teams that should win both of their conferences to get in. So how do I play this? Because they're both so big. I like a half unit on Liberty at plus 440. I like a half unit on App State 10-1. And then essentially, one of those is going to cancel out, but you're playing with a plus 220 and you're playing with a 5-1 when you get done with that. And you have 2 of maybe 4 teams, I think, that can even make it to the playoff, with Boise State out there, maybe another Sun Belt with Texas State, or maybe our love for the Mountain West, although I doubt it with the 7-game conference and the strength of schedule. But the last thing I'll say about Liberty, strength of schedule, 134th. The talent they have versus what they're playing is pathetic. App State is a play-in game to the college football playoff. Take a half unit on both.
All right, Ianello, I'm going to tee you up in this way. I talked about their issues defensively, giving up big plays, not being able to stop anybody in the red zone. But they do bring back TJ Bush and CJ Bazile as their pass rushers. Is that going to be enough for them to get a little bit better on that side of the ball? Or are you sticking with Colin, which is also my opinion, doesn't matter in Conference USA. There's no offense that I think can put together 60 minutes of explosive football to beat this team in a shootout. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I don't think that'll help them because I think the biggest issue they had last year was their secondary, and that was their biggest weakness. They couldn't stop the pass. They gave up too many big plays, and they lose both their starting corners to Colorado and Oregon State. So, like the offensive line wasn't that big of an issue to me. I thought their issue was more their secondary, and that to me is still a major question mark. The issue is just there's not an offense on their schedule that can take advantage of it until App State. So, I think, like Colin said, there's I mean, I hate Liberty, so I'm not playing any overs anyway, but there's just no value in the numbers. And I'm kind of taking a similar approach to Colin a little differently, where it's kind of going, I think the best way to approach it is just like this season, just anybody but Liberty, and you just set yourself up to root against them. So I'm doing it kind of similarly, where I'm investing in Boise State to make the playoff and Memphis to make the playoff. And if Liberty loses, those two teams are, if you want to swap out, Colin doesn't like Boise as much. If you want to do App State in Memphis or App State in Tulane, pick two teams from the Sun Belt, American, and Mountain West, and you listen to all of our podcasts. We'll all kind of give you different ones. I know Stuckey likes JMU. I don't know that I like them to make the playoff, but I certainly like them to win the Sun Belt. So I would say my best advice is pick two teams from those three other conferences and then root against Liberty all year. You need App State to beat them. And I think if they do, they're going to get jumped anyway, based on last year. And I think it's just fun to just hope if a CUSA team upsets Liberty at some point in the year, you're sitting pretty with two futures on other teams.
It's also nice if you have no action on the Flames, you can just enjoy a Jamie Chadwell offense. You don't have to have all this angst that it's not fair, that they have this downy soft schedule, and that, essentially they could run the table and hop over a team that's more deserving, which I agree with Colin. I don't think that's going to happen. I think a one-loss team is going to hop them because the committee, it's delivering a TV. Everything's about TV. It's about putting a television show into the time slot in the end of December, and they don't want to see the Flames. So unless something crazy happens and we have multiple two-loss champions in the G5 competing with them, I don't think you're going to see the Flames in that 12-team college football playoff. We turn to the Hilltoppers of Western Kentucky, 8-5 last year, 5-3 in conference. Tyson Helden now entering year 6. It ended with a crazy bowl comeback to beat Old Dominion. They were down 28-0 in that game. Their win total sitting at 7.5. Their odds to win the Conference USA title, 9-2. Odds to make the college football playoff field, 50-1. Let's start with the quarterback. Is it TJ Finley? Is it Caden Veltkamp, who was the hero of that second half comeback for the Toppers? Either way, they're going to be playing for a new play caller in Will Friends. And it's going to be interesting because if you look at Friends' track record as a play caller, far more balanced, a lot closer to a 55-45 kind of split, where last year for the Hilltoppers, 63% pass rate. So that could make a pretty big difference in terms of game flow, in terms of how often they're leaving their defense on the field for lots of snaps, which obviously didn't work for them in some high-scoring losses. It also could mean a big year for Elijah Young at running back with the line made up of all juniors and seniors. They get lucky on defense that Upton Stout removed his name from the portal. That was critical because they were okay against the pass last year, and he's their top cover corner. Just 24 sacks, though, on the entire season. That's 88th on a per-game basis. But the bottom could drop out for them because they were buoyed by 26 forced turnovers. And this is an important stat to look year over year. If you put any stock in the Phil Steele magazines, he would always focus on this. When you get a lot of fumble luck, usually that doesn't hold off, it doesn't carry over for multiple years, multiple games. So 11 of those turnovers were recovered fumbles. That was 7th nationally for a defense that gave up a ton of yards. They travel to Alabama, Boston College, Liberty, and they host Toledo. But the rest of the schedule is really manageable until the finale against Jacksonville State. I'm going to go under here. I think that they're going to have a regression defensively. I think offensively, losing Malachi Corley is a major deal. Dalvin Smith is a nice wide receiver. He's no Corley. So I think the offense takes a baby step back. I think the defense can be exposed if they don't get lucky in terms of turnovers. I know I'll bring you in here on the Hilltoppers, a team that you picked to win Conference USA last year. What are your thoughts here in 2024?
Yeah, it's hard after they were my pick. And again, I'm gonna try not to do this with every team, but you just have to kind of do how do they measure up to Western Kentucky? And I agree with you, or to Liberty. I think they take a step back, and you saw Liberty drum them last year. It wasn't even close. This defense, I agree with you. Getting Upton Stout back was massive, but the run defense was their biggest issue last year, and I don't see where they address that. I think the run defense is going to be a problem this year. I'm not as worried about the offense as you. At this point, I kind of just blindly trust Helen in this offense, whether it's Finley or Veltkamp, and then they, they lose Corley, but Western Kentucky always has wide receiver depth. They lost Jarrett Stearns and didn't miss a beat. So the offensive line loses 3 starters, but getting Quantavious Leslie back is big to kind of solidify that. I'm not super worried about the O-line. I will say the one thing, I think Western Kentucky has more talent than anybody in the conference other than Liberty. So I think they're set up nicely in that regard. The one thing I like about them, whether you honestly want to take the under or the over, I don't really have a feeling either way, is I think this is not one of those situations where you have to tie up your money till December, because I think Toledo kind of will dictate this win total. I think a win at home versus Toledo will go a long way because they're going to lose to Bama, probably Boston College, and Liberty. And if they lose to Toledo, this win total basically just comes down to, do they get upset at all in conference play? Because if they don't, a win at Toledo, they should go over this total. If they lose to Toledo, then you just got to hope, they just need to lose once and you're staying under this total. So I think you'll kind of have a good sense early on. I don't have a strong feeling. I definitely think they're the second best team, but I don't think they're close to Liberty yet.
It's been a constant coaching carousel at offensive coordinator for Western. And to Ionella's point, it hasn't really mattered in recent years. It's just, kept on rolling from the Zappy days into Reed. And now we have Veltkamp, who's coming off a huge bowl game. Are you worried at all about that in this fall, Colin? Or do you think it's just going to be more of the same from the tops?
I think it's more of the same from the tops, except from offensive philosophy. And you've already mentioned it with Wilfred coming in. We expect more of a balance in this offense to come down from that heavy 60% pass rate. And that kind of matches the personnel that they have. I mean, they are better running the ball now with their personnel and the talent that they have than they have on the outside. Because when you look at Dalvin Smith with his 71 targets coming back, just didn't have the juice that Michael Corley had. Dalvin Smith was about 1.6 yards per route run, not explosive at all. And actually nobody else that's returning is. So when you don't have the juice to get it downfield, you lose passers that are excellent over 20 yards. TJ Finley, he improved a lot last year at Texas State. 24-8 TD to INT ratio, 17-13 big time throw to turnover worthy play rate, which is a huge jump from where he was at Auburn. Had about a 9% turnover worthy play rate. He shaved that down to 2.7, but he still has to learn how to not make mistakes in a crowded pocket. That is still happening for TJ Finley. So the good news is the offense line, one of the higher ranked in this conference. They're going to run a lot more. I think they're going to have success here. The defense, I have zero answers for, but Upton Stout coming back does shoot this secondary up to be this projected as the second best in the conference. That's at least going to eliminate teams that are going to try to heavy attack them in the back end. But you're right. You look at these numbers last year, they were 43rd in coverage grading. They were 77th in allowing pass explosives. So those will improve, but that wasn't the worst part of the defense. The worst part of the defense was the run defense. The number is what has me on the over here. The over I'm talking about, I see it at 7 minus 150. I see it juiced up. I make this number 7.8. So then you go down the schedule and you say, okay, well, where are my wins at? I have TD plus favorites set aside for Western Kentucky against Eastern Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, who has no trench on either side of the ball, UTEP, completely brand new everywhere, Kennesaw State, not real good in the trench, not big enough, New Mexico State, and La Tech. I have 6 games where they're favored by at least 7 points. So to get to this 7 and at least push this bet, one of my short favorite spots against Toledo, Sam Houston, or Jacksonville State is going to happen because you have no shot to win Alabama and Liberty. So you have 3 coin flips. You just need one of them to push this number. So I'm in as a best bet on Western Kentucky over 7 at minus 150. I don't see any. I mean, the percentage for them to get 6 wins and that's it on this schedule is around like 9%. So 7 is more like a 42%er. So I'm definitely taking the over here.
We move on to a team that I'm actually pretty bullish on. I'm going to go over on the win total. I think they get to the Conference USA title game, and that's Jacksonville State. The Gamecocks coming off a 9-4 season, 6-2 in the CUSA in Rich Rod's second year. Now moving on, they're 60-1 to make the 12-team playoff. I'm not interested in getting that crazy, but let's talk about what they bring back. Lots of experience on the line that finished 22nd in run blocking last season. But will it be Zion Turner or my pick, Furman's Tyler Huff, running the show? He's a My Guy nominee. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Coming from FCS Furman, he's a hard-nosed runner. He got better as a passer throughout his time. He's also a commissioned second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Reserve. Rich Rod recruited him on Fort Huachuca in Arizona, not to be confused with Fort Hochtua. He had offers from NC State and Arkansas State. I think if he's the guy who ends up running this offense, this could be an even better version than they were last year because they bring back Anwar Lewis at running back and a dynamic transfer from the lower level at North Alabama. This offense will work, and I think it'll really work if it's tough, but you got to keep an eye on this quarterback battle in fall camp. Defensively, J-Rock Swain returns, but just 3 starters return with him. It was 17-13 late in the third quarter against Liberty last season before the bottom fell out in the fourth quarter. Salter in that game accounted for just 208 total yards, his second lowest total of the season. You don't necessarily need to beat him in the regular season, but obviously to win the conference title at plus 750, you got to beat him there. I think they're going to have a puncher's chance, the best, at least in this conference. Liberty's going to be a big favorite, deservedly so. But I need to talk myself into somebody, and JSU is the team for me. The schedule gives them time to work in a new quarterback, whether it's Turner, whether it's Huff, whether it's Smothers, whoever they end up going with. And if they can figure it out on defense, Luke Olson, as a play caller, I want to see what this defense looks like this fall. They get Liberty on October 30th. They close out on the road at Western Kentucky on November 30th. Outside of a road game to Louisville, every other game is within the realm of possibility for them to win. So I'm over on the win total. I like them. I'd love to see a market for just getting to the Conference USA title game, but I'm going to take a flyer at plus 750. Colin, I'll go to you first. What do you think about Rich Rod keeping the magic going here after a breakout season where they won 9 games moving up to Conference USA?
Well, I love that their offensive line returns a ton of pieces for this heavy rush offense. They should be about the 3rd best in the conference. Anwar Lewis, maybe the shiftiest back in this conference. 3.5 yards after contact, 29 missed tackles, but he only had 94 rushes last season, so he can really juke anybody out of their shoes. The Zion Turner over Zion Webb, I think we're going to get about the same production. We'll see who wins that quarterback position, like you said. And tight end Sean Brown is an absolute animal on this offense. I think defense is where you have to. I don't think there's any drop off with the offense whatsoever. They could be a little bit better in terms of running the ball, but I think the defense is where you need to focus because there's a scheme change. Luke Olson is coming in. He's been on the Tulsa staff for a year. He was a TCU analyst last year, but what you need to know is that he belongs to Joe Gillespie, the recently fired defensive coordinator of TCU. He was formerly at Tulsa, and Luke Olson falls from that, which means we're getting the 3-3-5 pinch. We're going to try to blitz everything in between the tackles. We're going to be a little bit aggressive. And it's going to be a very light front for this defense. Now, saying that, they have one of the best linebacker and defensive line combinations in the conference, and they're going to have to be ready here because the way that Joe Gillespie plays, he's got 6 in the box, and he's going to try to do it like one-on-one with everybody in there. So if anybody lines up with heavy rush tendencies, that's going to be a problem for Jacksonville State here. The number for me, I'd make them about 7.5% to win the conference. So Jacksonville State, for me, I would need about 12-1 to go ahead and purchase them. But this is the territory we're about to get into with all these teams that are remaining on this podcast. Like, you're going to have to find a little something and have a leap of faith because the numbers, I mean, they do get worse the farther you go down the list on the board. But right now, I would need 12-1. The bet that I had on these guys was under 8. Now, it's not that I don't like them, and it's not that I don't think that they can't achieve or go over that mark. But look at this schedule. They're going to be a TD plus underdog to Louisville, Liberty, and Western Kentucky. Let's just say they don't win those games. You have to win 8 of 9 to get over. After that, you have 9 games remaining. You have to win 8 of them to be a push. You can only lose 1. You got to win all of them to get over 8. So under 8 minus 125. Everything else, you're right. There's a lot of coin flips on here. You're going to be a TD plus fave against Eastern Michigan, Kennesaw. You have short rest going to New Mexico State. That could be tough with their run game. Middle Tennessee, La Tech, and FIU. And then you're a short favorite against Coastal, Sam Houston, and Southern Miss. So the schedule says that you could get to 9 wins, but you have no wiggle room whatsoever. You cannot have a bad day. And don't forget, this is the conference that likes to play on Tuesdays and Wednesdays in the month of October. That's really bad, in a couple spots. Jacksonville State has 5 days rest before New Mexico State comes to town on October 9th. Out of this win total at 8 is a little beefy for me because 9 is their ceiling.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with Colin where I'm not buying the under, but I'd probably lean there just because I also think there's just a sense that I think they just caught a lot of teams off guard last year. I think no one expected them to be good. I think they picked last in the conference. They were kind of expected to do what Sam Houston did, and I think they just kind of caught teams off guard. Rich Rod had them 3rd in the country in rushing, and I don't think that'll drop off much because the way they did it with Malik Jackson, Ron Wiggins, Anwar Lewis, they kind of gave everyone the ball, 50 yards per game of all 3 of them. Now Lewis is the main back. Georgia transfer Andrew Paul will be running with him as well. You mentioned the quarterback, whether it's Zion Turner coming over from UConn. He's another mobile guy, so he's basically just the same person as Zion Webb. People might just think Webb got married and changed his name. But I think the defense is where you could see a drop off. They lose Zach Alley to Oklahoma. They lose their studs, Chris Hardy and Jeremiah Harris. You mentioned Swain coming back is obviously big, but the defense was dominant last year. And I don't expect them to be as dominant, just especially early on in the year when they're adjusted to a new scheme. I'm not high on Coastal, but that's a tough game to start the year when you don't know who your quarterback is and you're breaking in a new defense. So schedule's tough. I think they slip up. So I'm with you guys I'm with Colin, where I see 3 losses and the hogwash in the middle. I think someone trips them up. So I'd lean under, but not enough to play it.
Middle Tennessee, the Blue Raiders with a new head coach, Derek Mason, come on down after a year away from coaching. He enters year 1. They're off a 4-8 season, 3-5 stock still. That whole era is finally over. Their win total set at 4.5 to win Conference USA title, 25-1, 300-1. You can also find a lot of these, middle class to lower class Conference USA teams anywhere all the way up to 1,000-1. Sportsbooks, do us a favor. Just throw like a 10,000-1 later in this pod for a Kennesaw. The fact that they're also 300 or 500-1 is ridiculous, but I won't belabor the point there. Derek Mason won some at Vanderbilt. I think because of the way it ended, people like to pile on him, but that's more than you can say about many Vandy coaches. He won 5 or more games 3 times in his final 5 years in Nashville. So I'm going to try to put a positive spin on that. I think he's walking into a pretty decent offensive position here if the offensive line, all the new faces work out. Nick Vattiato is a solid dual threat quarterback with a lot of experience. Holden Willis is a great G5 tight end. Receivers and both starting tackles got plundered in the portal. That's the main issue here. Amari Kelly from Auburn needs to really step up at wide receiver and be a difference maker from day one. Defensively, it's a reboot after starters left for Vatech, Tennessee, Miami, Vandy, and Memphis. That just is the way it goes sometimes in G5 land. You end up throwing your best pieces up to the Power 4. I think this defense is going to get bombed early by Ole Miss, Western Kentucky, and Memphis. This is an over team for me. I'm not interested in the win total. I'm not interested in any of the futures. I think a lot of these games are going to be very high scoring. They also have really good senior specialists, which I think could help in close games. I don't know if that's going to equate to them getting to 5 or 6 wins this year, but I do think there's going to be a lot of high scoring shootouts, which at the very least, if you're going to have some bad football, let it be high scoring bad football. Ionella, what do you think about the Blue Raiders now that Stock still is into retirement?
Yeah, I kind of agree with a lot of the stuff you said. I think Derek Mason gets a better rap. I think Vandy's so hard to win at, and I think he did a decent job. He took him to 2-3 bowl games. So I'm pretty not bullish, but I like the hire. You mentioned Vattiato coming back after a 3,000 yard, 23 touchdown season. Holden Willis switching over to tight end. That you mentioned Omari Kelly from Auburn. They also bring in Gamarian Carter from Vanderbilt as another receiver weapon there. They lost both their starting tackles to the portal, but they do bring back both running backs, Frank Peasant and Jaden Creedle. They were weird backs, Peasant especially, where he flashed talent. I think he's talented, but just also wasn't effective at all running the ball. So they're gonna need to see more from those two, and I think they can do it, but you got to see it. The changes to the offensive line likely won't help. You mentioned all the guys the defense lost in the portal. Linebacker Parker Hughes and corner Tyrell Raby are the only returning starters on the defense, but Derek Mason's known for a good defensive coach. That's kind of his bread and butter. So I do think he'll help them improve throughout the season. And that's kind of my take on Middle Tennessee is make a note to yourself that they are going to be a buy-on team for me in the second half. As Mason gets to bring the defense up to speed, you mentioned the start of the schedule. They're probably going to start 1-4. They'll win, you assume they beat Tennessee Tech, and then it's Ole Miss, Western Kentucky, Duke, Memphis. And then they go at La Tech, and that's where I'll probably be looking to hammer Middle Tennessee. I think you're going to get a lot of value in that game. 1-4. I think when you look at the back half of the year, I agree with you on the overs, but I'm going to start betting on Middle Tennessee after that kind of first 5-game stretch. As we head towards October, I'll be looking at back the Blue Raiders.
Is this a year 0 in Murfreesboro, or should we tell the locals to at least make their way to the stadium, watch a game or two from this Mason-led coach?
I completely agree with Ionello that the spot that you're going to start playing them is after the bye week on October 10th when they go and play Louisiana Tech, because they're going to get these first 5 games in. I'm not sure this coaching staff knows what they have on hand and what the strengths are. When you look at the history of some of these coordinators, like Bodie Reed is coming from Northern Iowa. Not really a lot of ties to this program, and we'll see what his offense can produce because it's not flashy. It's successful, but it's not flashy. And then when you look at Brian Stewart, He was a defensive coordinator for Houston in the XFL. So, I mean, we definitely have a collection here of some guys. I think the one thing that I keep coming back to, and I talked about this with Oklahoma's offensive line, both sides of the ball in the trench are projected to be the worst in this conference. Yes, below Kennesaw State. So that gives me a ton of pause. The offensive line completely gone. Guard Mateo Guevara is back, but he had a really high pass grade, but he had a terrible run blocking grade, one of the worst in the conference. So, there are players there, but the talent level is not there or the experience is not there. And then when you go to the defensive side, there's not a single returning starter coming back in this 3-4 defense that Brian Stewart's going to call. At least that's what he called in the XFL. So we'll see what comes up. I think the thing for me is I project this at 5.1, but I got to go under 5 because when you look at this team, you think, well, the only thing that they're going to be able to do, there's only a couple things they're going to do, and they're not going to be able to defend the run. You are going to be dead last in the trench, and that is going to affect you and how you defend. And when you look at the games that they kind of have coin flips against, I mean, this schedule is brutal. Like La Tech, you're going to La Tech, they're going to be off of a bye. You're going to go to Jacksonville State, you're going to be off of a bye. New Mexico State is a coin flip game, but guess what? They're extremely good in the trench. They can still run the ball because they got Diego Pavia's entire offensive line, no matter who's behind them. I think, the three of us could run through the holes that New Mexico State is going to create with that offensive line. So that's a bad mismatch. I don't have any money on Middle Tennessee State. I agree. The time to start playing them, if the team is still responding to Derek Mason, that they're a play-on team for the rest because their power rating should be blown to shit. And, when you get enough experience on the offensive line 5 games in, it's the same thing that I said about Oklahoma. You may have 0 returning starters, but by the time you get to the 6th game of the season, they're completely experienced. So I would say this is a year 0.5.
All right, from one team in a year 0 to another team coming off a historically good season. The New Mexico State Aggies, they went 10-5 last year, 7-1 in the CUSA. They make it to the title game, but Jerry Kill is gone. Tony Sanchez moving up from wide receiver coach. Their win total set at 4. Odds to win the conference title 80-1. College football playoff 300, 500-1 out there in the market. Let's pour one out for Jerry Kill and Diego Pavia. They gave us so many winners last year. It was such a fun ride. And all of the cold water hitting me with Tony Sanchez being the coach because he was a disaster at UNLV with more resources, a better recruiting footprint. He never got it done. I don't like this hire whatsoever. You also have a quarterback competition, 124th in returning production. I know that Ionello loves Monty Watkins, who averaged over 10 yards per carry, and the offensive line is elite. So I do think that gives them a high ceiling offensively if they get competent quarterback play. But the secondary is really the only thing that you can look defensively that I really feel good about. The addition of Oklahoma State's Nick Session could be, they could be okay, maybe top 4 or 5 in the conference in terms of stopping the pass. But I question their run defense. It has to replace a decent amount of players, tackles up front. Let's look at the schedule. Liberty, at Fresno, at Sam Houston, at Jacksonville State, all before October 9th, and late games against Western Kentucky at home and at Texas A&M. That could be a late body blow. I'm not going to do it because these are my guys.
Can't do it.
I lean under. I'm not going to put an official play out there. I'm certainly not going to pick against them because there's going to be some huge spreads early, Liberty, Fresno in particular. Just in general, I am just going to bask in what 2023 was, what they meant to this podcast, what they meant to so many gamblers. But, history is history. So we move on to the Tony Sanchez era, begrudgingly, as far as I'm concerned. What do you think, Ionello?
That's exactly right. I am. Just can't root against this team after what they did to us. But you said it. They lost our sweet baby boy, Diego Tavandi. They, by the way, let's go ahead. We're going to officially adopt that game. Vanderbilt Auburn is officially a G5 game this year, Colin. Me and Calabrese are locking in Vanderbilt money line. Jerry Kill's sipping margaritas in Mexico. They also lost backup QBs, Blaze Berlowitz to Vandy, Gavin Frakes to Virginia. You mentioned the QB competition. You got Deuce Hogan, Brandon Nunez, and Parker Award. Who's QB1? They said the battle will continue into fall. You mentioned him, the official, my guy of the CUSA, Monty Watkins. He was my guy last year. I was banging this drum all year.
Give him the damn ball. He's got 10 yards per carry.
The dude averaged 9.7 yards per carry last season on 59 carries, which is a lot to be averaging 10 yards per pop, but not enough when you're averaging 10 yards per pop. He, on 59 carries last year, 21 of them went for at least 10 yards. 45% of his carries went for a first down or a touchdown. He should get the ball every single play for this offense. I love Monty Watkins. He is my guy. I'm going to have to make a Go Monty Go shirt. And you mentioned the offensive line should be fine. So I really do like what they're doing there. And they got to replace a ton of receivers, though. Trent Hudson, Jonathan Brady, Eli Stowers, all gone. I agree with you. The secondary does have some hope. Dylan Early's returning. You mentioned Nick Sessions coming in from Oklahoma. They also brought in Miles Norwood from Iowa State, Josiah Cox from Arizona as two safeties that I really like. The linebacker has massive questions. So can they stop the run? And Tony Sanchez is not a good coach. He never had a winning season in 5 years. I absolutely hated this hire. This is also just an extremely hard place to win at. And you bring in a coach who couldn't win at a place that's not hard to win at. So I think 5 wins is a lot to ask from this team, but they were just too good to us last year to ever want to root against them. So we will always have our sweet baby boy, Diego, but I cannot invest in the Aggies again this year.
The land of enchantment giveth and it taketh away. They gave us Bronco Mendenhall in Albuquerque, but they're giving us Tony Sanchez. Am I being too harsh, Colin, or is this hire just not what the doctor ordered?
Yeah, I mean, you guys can flash your pennants and your shirts and whatever the hell it is you got over there. But once Tony Sanchez was named the head coach, I'm off this train completely. I mean, a quick story here. I think it was 2016. I flew to Vegas. The UNLV was 50-1 to win the Mountain West. I flew in, went to the counter at Cantor Gaming, tried to put $1,000 on 50-1, and they limited me to about $113. And they said, "What's your big deal with UNLV?" I said, "Armani Rogers is coming in. Tony Sanchez produced all these blue chips from Bishop Gorman. This is going to be the greatest thing. No one's going to see the running Rebels coming around." Egg on my face. That was a terrible, terrible take, because Tony Sanchez never panned out as a college coach whatsoever. It was a disaster at UNLV. And if you look at all those 5-star blue chip recruits that come out of Bishop Gorman High School out of the Vegas area, they've never had an impact on college football. I can't remember ever seeing one in the NFL. I mean, I'm sure someone's going to call me out on one player, but they've never produced at the college level than what was produced at that high school. Overhyped. All right. So UNLV, disaster. What's going to happen here? Disaster. All right. Let's talk about the offensive coordinator, Tyler White. He was a special teams coach. Why not make him the offensive coordinator? Joe Morris. Hey, he got stolen from Sam Houston. That was a pretty good get. They'll bring him in. He's going to have nickel packages. He's going to split between a 3 and 4 man front, but he's going to have about an average blitz rate, play a ton of quarters, doesn't want to give up explosives here. But essentially, I'm not going to bet them, even though I project this 4.6. The win total is 4.5. I think that they can get over this win total. If you need a bet on New Mexico State, they're going to be faves over SEMO, New Mexico, La Tech, and UTEP, right? And when you get those 4 wins, then you got a couple of coin flips. Florida International. New Mexico State will be off a bye. They get a lot of rest for Florida International. Then Middle Tennessee State. Huge trench advantage in that game that we just spoke of. So they can clip over 4.5. Am I putting my money behind Tony Sanchez? I will defer and take my investments elsewhere.
Colin, you weren't a fan of Bishop Gorman legend Tate Martell?
Is he still on the Miami, or is he on Ohio State's roster? Which roster is he on these days?
There's always a rumor he's like a wide receiver in the MAC or something. He's like one of those urban legends. I haven't seen him in Central Michigan chips, fire up chips, maroon. But
he transferred.
I thought he was
UNLV,
a tight end. I thought he was a tight end.
I mean, I think he was like 5'9". He said he was 6 feet tall. I'm sure he could have been a quality tight end. All right, if New Mexico State potentially is going down, can I talk you into Sam Houston going up? 3-9 last year, 2-6 in the conference. Casey Keeler enters year 11 with the Bearcats. He went to 4 FCS / Division I AA title games. He won 2 of them. Their win total sitting at 4.5. Their Conference USA title odds 17-1. College football playoff, like I said, they're all mispriced. No one's betting them to make the 12-team playoff, but 300, 400-1. Keeler is somebody who can really coach. The transition last year did not go well because he had awful quarterback play. Keegan Shoemaker finished 112th in QBR, but this receiving core is really strong, particularly Noah Smith. 3 starters back on the line. Jace Bauer time. He comes in from Central Michigan. I have a total new vision of the Bearcats in orange this year because this guy did some special things with his legs last year. He ran for 106 yards against Northern Illinois in a shootout last year. He scored 4 rushing touchdowns in an upset of South Alabama. If he keeps teams honest with his legs, this offense will jump up in a huge way because he has the weapons on the perimeter. Defense, they hired a new defensive coordinator, the youngest in all of college football. Skylar Cassidy, just 29 years of age. They have experience at all three levels of this defense. Not a whole ton of returning snaps, but at least they have somebody in each position room to look at as, their senior leader or their junior leader. The entire starting lineup, by the way, either a junior, a senior, or a super senior on their defense. Solid specialists, including Colby Sessoms, who went 11 for 14 on field goals. That's going to be clutch in a lot of close games because they have many winnable games on this docket. At Rice, Rice losing a lot in terms of their overall playmakers on the perimeter. Home against Hawaii, home against New Mexico State, at UTEP, at FIU, at Kennesaw. Can they put it together this year? I'll start with you, Colin. This was a team that we went back to the well many times. We got burned by Shoemaker. Are we going in on Sam Houston again with a new quarterback?
We are. This is the team that I predict will make the conference championship game along with Liberty. Can they beat Liberty? Probably not. But if you can find your bets to get them in, that's good. Or you can take these conference futures, which, by the way, we're in August. And since nobody's talking about Sam Houston or any of these other teams, Liberty's just going to get thicker on the number to win this conference. And the rest of the teams are going to have some serious value. And this is one of them. So if you're going to look at it, I make them 13% to win this conference. It's odds of plus 670. You want to go check another power rating system out there? SP Plus makes it 5% to win this conference, which correlates to about a 20-1 ticket. What's the numbers out there? There's 25-1s all over. So from a value perspective, they have it. Now go ahead and look at what this roster was last year. A second order win total darling. A lot of games that they had in hand, zero offense. I will not forget that this team was 0-5, 0-6, didn't win a game, and was favored and steaming in the market. Wales like this team. Smart guys, sharp guys like this team. They like the coaching staff. We do have a 29-year-old defensive coordinator that's been hired here. Skylar Cassidy comes in from Abilene Christian, formerly at Missouri State.
By the way, can you explain that? Because I was like, I'll dig into his resume a little bit. I'm sure that his defense at Abilene was great. It was not. So what is with this hire?
I don't know. It's like 29-year-old, and you go and look at his numbers. He has a 3-man front, 3-4, 3-3-5, and he goes that in passing downs. A very low blitz rate of 16%. That is really low at the college level, which means he's just there to stop explosive plays. If you're running a 3-3-5 and you're not blitzing at any time, it really is kind of a questionable call. But he's probably got a recommendation for Bobby Petrino, and I don't know the relationship between the coaching staff between Abilene Christian and Sam Houston. Whatever recommendation came through on that resume to get a 29-year-old as a defensive coordinator, but he must have impressed. Maybe brought a slideshow, maybe brought a PowerPoint, maybe a little process flow in Visio. I don't know what the hell he did to Casey Keeler in the interview because he got the job. They do have offense this year. I love Jace Bauer coming in from Central Michigan. He's going to compete with Grant Gunnell. There's major injuries to this offense last season, and that last season was supposed to be the year they sat them all out as red shirts so they could join and rumble inside Conference USA, and then they all got hurt. So those championship games that they've played in the FCS, there's still some remaining remnants from those players that are still on the squad ready to play. Now, Quavius Humphreys he's going to return. He's going to get plenty of single coverage as a wide receiver. The offensive line it's been an issue from a size perspective, but if you look at him now, their right tackle, Orion Irving, he lists at 6'6", 290. Everybody else is over 300 pounds. So we still have a little bit of a light issue at right tackle, but you might be able to get away with that in this conference. So when you go and you look at the schedule, this is one of the easiest road schedules in the conference. And that's what's important to me. Whenever Sam Houston, or as the lady said in my video at the College World Series, the Stephen Hawking Bobcats, they're going to start the season off 0-2 versus Rice and UCF. They don't really have a shot in that game. They have a coin flip game against Hawaii the following week. I would be surprised if they lose that, considering the passing attack that's coming versus this defensive style that's not aggressive whatsoever. Is going to be a problem. They're going to be an underdog to Texas State. There's a really good chance this team's going to be 0-4 in non-conference through the first 5 games. And then after that, you could be looking at books having live odds on this conference, and Sam Houston could be 60-1, right? And you start off with a 1-4 record or a 0-4 record in non-con. Then you go into it, they're going to be favored in Conference USA play against New Mexico State, at UTEP, at FIU. Louisiana Tech they have coming at home. They're going to be 14-point favorites. Kennesaw comes to their house. They're going to be 11-point favorites. Of course, they're going to be dogs of Western Kentucky, Jacksonville State, and Liberty. But there's 5 easy wins on this conference, and the road schedule is pretty good compared to everybody else. I can't get over the fact this team was 0-5, 0-6, and they were steaming as a favorite in the market. I am on this train. I think they're good enough to pull off an upset against one of the big 3 in this conference. The offense is going to be completely renewed. Just got to hope this new defensive coordinator, 29 years old, the defense is a huge question. I will say that.
One of our favorite stories, Ionello, is when you take an FCS program that wins and wins big, you move them up. That's, the Sun Belt is kind of built on programs like that. Do you believe that they're going to turn a corner here and show us a little of that James Madison magic, or do you think it's going to be a struggle just to get to bowl eligibility?
No, I do believe. I think Keeler did a great job. They were an FCS powerhouse. We saw it. They tried to save all their players. They basically redshirted the entire team. They tried to save all their players for last year. It ended up being a disaster, but because of that, they have pretty good depth across the board, which a lot of teams in this conference can't say. They just need to find a quarterback. I mean, they bring back their leading rushers. They add their 3 leading rushers. They add Jay Ducker from Memphis to the mix. They bring back basically every player who caught a pass for them last year, except their number 3 receiver and their backup tight end. So while the defense has to retool a little bit, Kavion Gaither should be the anchor at middle linebacker. And while I say it was a disaster, and Colin mentioned this too, like they had 5 one-score losses last year. So I think they were a lot closer than it seemed. And now they bring back all that depth. So I kind of do like this team as well. And the only reason I didn't bet this win total over is because the CUSA was the last team I did my prep for. And when you look at the non-con, I think this win total, when you do all the coin flippy games, this win total could very well be decided early, and it could very well be decided with Rice and Hawaii in the non-con. And the problem is I did both of those previews first, and I already bet both of those overs. So I kind of need them to both beat Sam Houston. So I don't really want to go against myself there. But honestly, if they get one of those 2 games, this total should go over. I'm just kind of hoping they don't, because I already bet Rice and Hawaii.
All right, my face muscles are hurting because I'm forcing myself to smile, be optimistic about these Conference USA teams. I'm going to give myself a break and turn to the La Tech Bulldogs. 3-9 last year, 2-6 in conference. Sonny Cumbie in year 3, 6-18 so far. Their win total set at 4.5. Odds to win the conference 25-1, 300-1 to make the playoff. This is the kind of roster that gets you fired after a 6-18 start. As Colin, put in all the work, keeping track of all the transfer activity, returning production, -9 in the net TARP. That's worst in the conference. That's tied 9th worst in America. Jack Turner, their quarterback, has been meh in limited action, 5 TDs, 5 picks, sub 57% completion percentage. Denario Davenport comes in to revive the running game that finished 99th last season. The offensive line does have 4 seniors, 2 of whom are returning starters, so maybe the run game gets a little bit better. But the defense was so bad against the run last year, and if you're hoping for that 5th win to cash in over, look at this finish. Jacksonville State at home, at Western Kentucky, at Arkansas, and home against Kennesaw State. 3 of those teams can really run the ball. We're going to talk about the Owls in a second from Kennesaw. That is not a good recipe for a La Tech team that is desperate. I'm going under 4.5 here. Sonny Cumbie is out after this season. I'm putting my stake in the ground. Somebody has to lose games, as I like to say when we go through these previews. It's going to be the Bulldogs here this fall. I'll go to you first, Colin. What are your thoughts on Sonny Cumbie just not being able to get it done? And with Smoke Harris no longer being that big play guy, receiving and returning, I just don't see where the offense is going to come from to be able to boost a really shaky defense.
Well, for those of you that have access to markets of first coach to be fired, this is up there with the Dave Aranda and the Sam Pittmans of the world, because Sonny Cumbie's AD that hired him moved on. He's like in an assistant position within the SEC office. He's not even an AD anymore. He's just gone. And the new AD, I don't think is very long for Cumbie. Probably wants to have his own regime in there. So I'd keep an eye on that. He does have a new defensive coordinator, Jeremiah Johnson from Northern Iowa. Can really never say anything out of Northern Iowa is bad. They're always solid in the FCS level. Jack Turner, I mean, more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws, and still it's not that much, not a big sample. This team had 11 drops, and Jack Turner himself in 149 passing attempts, there were 11 drops. He can't hit his targets whatsoever. Offensive line returns 2 known quantities. I'm not saying good quantities, 2 known quantities at guard. Complete mystery at tackle and center. You kind of have to have those in this conference. And then you go to the defensive side. Johnson ran a 4-3 and then a 3-3-5 at UNI, about an average 20% blitz, a lot of quarters. They're not going to allow explosives. And Cedric Woods and Michael Richard return as the 2 best safeties in Conference USA. The love stops there, because with Louisiana Tech, I got them as a fave against Nichols and UTEP. I got a coin flip against Kennesaw. I'm not sure how they get to 5 wins. I'm not sure how they get to 4 wins. I don't see it. So, I project them at 3.6. SP Plus makes it 4.8. There's 5s out there under minus 115. That's the best bet on this team. There's no way they're getting to 6 unless they pull some sort of David Braun Northwestern coup and Jeremiah Johnson's the new interim and they all of a sudden win the back half of their schedule. I don't see it happening. So under for me.
Rustin Revival, or are you with us on this being the Sonny Cumbie funeral march?
Yeah, this was the one bet I made. Under 5, easy. I think, Cumbie wants to run this high-powered offense, and Hank Bachmeier was terrible, and Jack Turner was somehow worse. And now he takes over as the full-time starter. You mentioned Smoke Harris, who kind of did everything for this team. They also lose Cyrus Allen. They also lose Kyle Maxwell. So they lose all their receivers. The defense returns just 3 starters after ranking 129th in the country at stopping the run. Cornerback Cedric Woods, safety Michael Richard are solid pieces on the secondary, but there is just a massive question about this front 7. And this is a team that won just 3 games last year with a very talented wide receiver room. And now they have no playmakers on offense. They want to throw the ball around and be a high-powered offense. They don't have the horses to do that. Jack Turner looks terrible. The defense was an absolute mess. So, yeah, they don't play Liberty this year, but they go to NC State, they go to Arkansas. Every CUSA game is a coin flip, but I am pretty down on this team. I'm with Colin. We're under 5. There is no chance this team wins 6 games. So at the very least, you're getting a push. But I don't even think they sniff. I think 3 wins again would be lucky. I think they're worse than they were last year. They won 3 games last year. So I'm super, super, super down on this team.
Here's a middle-class team in the CUSA that I'm a little bit bullish on. FIU, 4-8 last year, 1-7 in conference. Mike McIntyre and both coordinators back for year 3. Their win total set at 4. Odds to win the conference title, 100-1, 300-1 to make the 12-team playoff. They were a very young offense last year, led by Kewan Jenkins, who was a freshman quarterback. The lefty accounted for 3 total touchdowns in 3 separate games. He also threw as many interceptions as he did touchdowns. So if he can cut down on the turnovers, obviously that's going to be a big plus for them. But he also has that continuity with his head coach and offensive coordinator and 3 starters on the line and an established group of pass catchers. The defense, though, was really awful, particularly, in their last 4 games. They gave up 42 points per game in the final third of their schedule last year. Back 8 of the 3-3-5 could be improved thanks to returning starters, but the run defense got shredded and lost their leading tackler, Jordan Gerard, to transfer. But this schedule is just littered with winnable games, so your total is never really dead. You got a home game against Central Michigan at FAU, Monmouth, La Tech at home, New Mexico State at home, at Kennesaw, and home against Middle Tennessee. So I'm certainly leaning over. This is a team that I picked a few spots last year. Unfortunately, I got on the train too late after they had that little 3-game winning streak. Hopefully, I can pick the right spots to back them. I like Jenkins a lot. He came from a very proud program in high school where he won so many games. He's been the established guy his entire life as a quarterback. So I think there's an opportunity for him to take a big step forward this year. As I said, if he can cut down on those turnover-worthy throws. Ionella, where are you on FIU, a team that, has been the butt of the jokes for many years? They don't have enough money for pads or jerseys, and, they can get boat raced in a lot of games. But also, they're still in South Florida. So this roster overall, I think, speaks to their geography. They have some talent, and if the quarterback pops and cuts down on the turnovers, is that going to be enough for them to get to 5 wins and to cash in over, in your opinion?
I'm not as bullish on them as you. I'm not as high on Jenkins. I think his turnover worthy plays are a massive concern, and I'm not so sure they're just going to magically go away. Finish the year with 11 touchdowns, 11 picks. He needs to be much better. He loses Chris Mitchell, his top receiver. They bring back most of their other pieces, but it's just a matter of, are those pieces any good? You mentioned the defense. They manage just 17 sacks all season. They create absolutely no havoc. So I'm just not super sold on them. And Mike McIntyre has been a head coach for 11 seasons at 3 different schools and has managed just 2 winning seasons in his career. Is he a good coach? He really hasn't shown us anything that indicates that he is. So I'm not as high on them as you are. Again, in this conference, anything can happen. But yeah, no, it's a pass for me.
Listen, I like this team. They're fun to watch. Keon Jenkins is a powder keg of good and a powder keg of bad. I mean, when you have 17 big-time throws and 22 turnover-worthy plays, it gets exciting, and then it gets pretty lonely when you have a bet on them. I felt that a couple times last year, especially that Bryant game. There's some consistency coming back to this offense. You know, David Yost has a good bit of it. I mean, Keon Jenkins has more continuity with Eric Rivers at wide receiver, with his offensive line, with Shamari Lawrence. There's some continuity here where last year it was just kind of like snap the ball and where's my route tree? I've never seen these guys before. So at least Florida International has that going. The defensive side for Jovan Dewitt, the defensive coordinator, not looking good here. Predicted to be one of the worst defensive lines, one of the worst secondaries in this conference. They had zero havoc, dead last in all the havoc categories. Mike McIntyre has made it his point to go ahead and try to make this a more havoc-laden defense. Not really sure how you do that. You have about 60% coming back on that side of the ball. That's about mid FBS. So you're just going to teach an old dog how to strip balls and tackles for losses and PBUs. I'm not sure. Now, the good news is Florida National doesn't play Western Kentucky, which would completely destroy them on the defensive line. And if Western Kentucky pass, it'd destroy them in the back end too. So when you look at the schedule, you say, can I get over 4.5? And I think you can, because you have short favorite spots against Monmouth and La Tech. I think La Tech is really some problems this year. But then that's the only 2 wins you can count on. But can I get 3? I have coin flips with Central Michigan, at UTEP, home against Sam Houston, home against New Mexico State, at Kennesaw, home against Middle Tennessee. That's a lot of coin flips. So it's a lot of questions, and you have to deep dive in. Where can Keon Jenkins take, where can he assert himself and not have a bunch of turnovers? And there's plenty of defenses that I just named, like UTEP, Middle Tennessee, Kennesaw. Those are teams I don't think their defenses can control what Jenkins wants to do with his weapons. So I do like over 4.5 at plus 120. That allows you to have 2 of these coin flip games and a number of options to try to get over that with plenty of headroom because there's so many coin flips.
The UTEP Miners, one of the darlings of the Group of 5 deep dive. We got sound drops. We got all kinds of fun things to say about those boys out in West Texas. They got themselves a new head coach. 3-9 last year. Dimmel gone. 2-6 in conference. Scotty Walden in from Austin P, a big-time winner at the FCS level. Their win total set at 4, 60-1 to win the conference title, 300-1 to make the playoff. Lots of new faces as Walden builds basically from scratch. Could be Cade McConnell, a quarterback, or Skylar Locklear, who's more of a dual threat. His offenses at Austin P, they slapped. They averaged over 34 points per game last season. Look out for Jevin Jackson, almost 1,400 yards last year with APSU. Big offensive line blocking for him. 3 starters over 310 pounds. They also add in this, specialty position. They call it the minor back, a dual threat run receive position. Kind of think about the old school, like Percy Harvin with the Florida Gators, jet sweeps, bubble screens. He's 5'7". He's a dynamo. Cam Thomas, he's the one going to fill this role. So keep an eye out for the minor back. Secondary was a strength last year. They bring back Josiah Allen and welcome in Corey Chapman from Austin P, who has a lot of buzz playing the spur position. He's going to be on some preseason lists for all conference in the CUSA. They'll need to hope that their new defensive line holds up because it did not last year. 125th against the run, 113th in tackling. That is problematic with a few teams with their offensive line really figured out in this conference and some quality running backs. At Nebraska, at Liberty early, they're going to look silly. Don't worry about that. Just go ahead and take a little added points in terms of against the spread value that you're going to get. If they lose by 40 to those 2 teams, that's fine. But a closing slate in Conference USA play is what I have circled here. Middle Tennessee, Kennesaw, and at New Mexico State could give them momentum into 2025. This is a pass. I just want to see what Scotty Walden looks like here in year 0 for the Miners. But this is a team that I think should feel optimistic. I always like hiring people that run their own programs. I'm not optimistic about coordinators who don't have head coaching experience moving down to the G5 level. I want somebody who's a grown-up, who knows how to handle alumni, the NIL issues, everything beyond just inside the lines on Saturdays. I think Scotty Walden's a great hire, just maybe not this year. What are your thoughts, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, this is Scotty Walden, who immediately showed up into the student section of the basketball games, painted himself up, and yelled as loud as he possibly could. I think there was a grand total of 20 Miners in the student section there. But I mean, good for Scotty Walden. He's saying all the right things. He's doing all the right things. He's a program builder. He brought his defensive coordinator, JJ Clark, over. Is this a year 0 situation? I mean, I'm putting them at about 20% on offense, 33% on defense, returning from an experience perspective. They are well below mid-average FBS numbers as far as experiments go. And the defense is just completely wiped on the defensive front 7. And when you look at the players that are left, I go back to the value over replacement term. None of them are anything worth from a grading perspective or from a talent blue chip perspective or star rating, I should say, coming in. nothing really sets up. And UTEP was absolutely horrific in defending the run. I don't think I could find a single stat that was like over 125th. They're pretty bad at defending the run. I think that's going to continue here. As far as their schedule goes, it's a coin flip game against Kennesaw State and Southern Utah. That they're just not going to be projected that high. And then they're going to be short dogs, real short dogs against Sam Houston, FIU, La Tech, and Middle Tennessee State. I do like the under 4 here. It's just way too much green in the trenches, in the defensive front seven. Quarterback play is projected to be, not too well with Skylar Locklear. He's a dual threat. There's a host of transfers coming in from Austin Peay. I mean, Austin Peay just lost in the first round of the FCS playoffs, and Austin Peay was a fringe top 25 team. You just can't pick that up and sew it into El Paso and say, well, I'm good enough to be 123rd in FBS football. It's not going to work like that. They're just trying to fill gaps, get it too deep filled out. Number is taking a lot of steam. Maybe that's my fault. They opened up 5. I drove up to Kansas to my graveyard, started whacking the minors like crazy. Down to 4 in the market. I think 4 is the last number you're going to go at, but I still think that this is a rebuild. But to go back to what we said about Derek Mason, this is actually the team. When you have a motivator like Scotty Walden, who brings in everything that he had at Austin Peay, from culture in the locker room, from how you handle your players, they'll start picking it up towards the end of October when you get through these midweek games, and they're going to be live. At least if they're still playing hard. It's one of those teams that you look at the last 3 weeks of November and you're thinking they're still playing hard. They're going to snag one. So, kind of reminds me of Sam Houston, right? Last year, right? No winnable games, still playing as hard as they possibly can. That's what you're looking for here. And I think that fits UTEP's bill, but I like under 4.
Are you going to take your pickaxe and swing at this win total, Ianello, or is it a pass for Texas Western?
Yeah, I'm going to pass on this. I think, Dan and Dimmel getting fired was obviously a big positive for UTEP, I think, but they also lost all their good players. They lost Hankins and Burgess. They lost Tyron Smith. They lost Kelly Akariki. They lost Justin Mayers on the line. They lost Vaughn, Hilton, Neal on the defense, and a bunch of other pieces. And while everything I read about Scotty Walden is he's just an absolute firecracker of energy, like big rah-rah guy. So I don't hate Colin, getting them motivated at the end. Here's the problem. When you look at, he's bringing in all his boys from Austin Peay, but the problem is Skylar Locklear, 5'10". Running back Javon Jackson, 5'8". His wide receivers, Trey Goodman, 5'11", 175 pounds. If it's windy, he's going to fall over. Jaden Smith. That's 5'11", 175.
Man, leave 175 pounds. All right, go ahead.
Jaden Smith, 5'10", 195 pounds. Cam Thomas, you mentioned him. Okay, 5'7", 170 pounds. Like, that, I don't know how, not that the CUSA is known for these massive guys, but they're going to be super undersized across the board. The defense brought in a lot of small guys as well. The defense was super weird last year. You mentioned it. They were horrible against the run, but like low-key pretty good against the pass, which is like, you don't usually see, like, they were like really good against the pass and really bad against the run. You don't usually see that as much. And I have, again, massive questions about the front seven, so I don't know how the run defense is going to get much better. And just without knowing who the QB is and just seeing, how undersized this group is and not knowing how they'll hold up in a better league, yeah, I just can't play a win total here. There's just too much uncertainty for me.
All right, Mitchell, if you can go ahead and clip Ianello saying that 5'10", 190 pounds is really in good shape. It's underweight. I would love to play that next time I step on the scale, because I've been plumping up in this offseason. I don't feel like 190 pounds is all that's felt, but I like what you guys are doing. I'm feeling better about myself hearing about the skill position players at UTEP.
It's a problem when that's your biggest player on offense.
We are going to close with Kennesaw State, and I have no problem stumping for them, at least in terms of them being feisty against the spread here in year 1 of the FBS football. Brian Bohannon has been the FCS National Coach of the Year. He's been their coach since the program got off the ground in 2015. Yes, they went 3-6 last year, but similarly to Sam Houston State 2 years ago, they redshirted a lot of guys. They're saving guys. They're not burning, years of eligibility. So it'll be interesting to see what they look like this year with a win total set at 2.5. They're ineligible for, postseason play, so you don't have to worry about that futures market. Let's get into some of the specifics here. Same head coach, as I mentioned, for their whole existence. By year 3 at the FCS level, he got them to the quarterfinals and a top 10 finish in the polls, 11-2 and a 5th place finish in 2018. He won 11 games 4 times between 2017 and 2021. This guy can coach. So why is everybody clowning the Owls? Well, they lost 6 games last year, but they lost by 7 to Chattanooga, who was 14th in the final FCS poll, 3 to Furman, who was a top 10 team, and 3 at Sam Houston State, who was at the FBS level. Their defense was top 30 in the FCS against both the run and the pass. And now the headline, he limited several players who were going to come back, as I mentioned, into his 2 deep to be able to give them some depth so they don't absolutely get decimated and deal with attrition throughout the season. They run, in my opinion, the perfect offense to be an underdog. They run the triple option. Bohannon's offense over the last 9 seasons have thrown the ball on average just 19.3% of the time. So close your eyes, picture a service academy, and that's what makes it more palatable to be able to say they don't have any returning quarterbacks with experience throwing the football. 11 career pass attempts across all of their quarterbacks. I don't care as deeply about that as I would if they were running an air raid. Michael Benefield is their top back. He's got plenty of pop, 6.3 yards per carry. As I said, I think people are sleeping on them because they're going to look at their brand new. Every magazine's got them 134th in terms of the rankings. They don't have the quarterback play. But here's the thing. They finished 5th in turnover margin last season. And that is an element that I think can carry over year to year. They prioritize ball security. They're going to play keep away. And that's why I have them circled as an against the spread team. Their defense has sneaky experience for a unit that only returns 3 starters, as I mentioned, because they're hiding some of those guys with the red shirt. Finally, look at Adam Watkins to be really good on the edge. That's, a guy I want to circle on this team. The schedule: at San Jose State, UT Martin against the Skyhawks, at UTEP, Sam Houston against FIU. Are there 3 wins there? I don't know. That's not for me to say. I'm going to pass, but I am going to play them against the spread plenty of times because people are going to be scrolling through their apps. These casuals are going to say, I've never heard of Kennesaw State. I'm just going to fade them automatically. I can't wait for them to have a drive that's 9 minutes long where they make a 17-yard field goal at the goal line, and that's enough to cover some of these spreads. So, Ianella, I'll go to you first. I know it is yeoman's work to go through the very bottom of G5 land and preview some of these teams, but I got myself fired up because I was just sick of the slander for the Owls. Let's get some excitement for a team moving up to FBS.
I don't know how much excitement I'm going to bring. I think it's just a big fat question mark because you mentioned them redshirting a bunch of guys. You look at Davis Bryson, who's expected to be their starting quarterback. Yeah, he made 1 start last season. He was 0 for 6 passing. And whether he's going to pass a lot or not, 0 for 6 is not good. If you're going to,
he's not going to pass a lot. I'm going to go ahead and ruin the surprise there. They're not going to.
All right, but if he's going to throw 6 passes, I'd prefer him he complete at least 3 of them. He was 2 of 11 passing on the season for 53 yards. So yeah, I'm not saying 11's a lot of pass attempts, but 2 is even fewer completions. If you're going to have 11 passes, let's go ahead and complete 7 of them. So you mentioned the schedule. They start at UTSA, then they're home against Louisiana, then at San Jose State. They play Liberty, they play Western Kentucky, they play Jacksonville State, they play Sam Houston, they play all the top teams in the conference. So I'm nervous when you look at, they redshirted a bunch of guys. We saw that work for Jacksonville State and not work at all for Sam Houston. So they're going to win, you give them the win against UT Martin. Maybe they pull off 1 conference upset against UTEP or something. Over 2.5, you're going to need them to pull 2 upsets off. I don't know that I can kind of bet on that. So they're just a big fat wait and see, and hope you see what Sam Houston. Hope they get better at the end of the year, but they're a big stay away for me.
The floor is yours, Colin. Can you pump some juice into Kennesaw?
Yeah, I mean, there's no real spot here on this schedule where they're going to be a favorite and they're going to be able to say, oh, yep, that's a win, because you're at a coin flip against the UT Martin Skyhawks. And then you're a short dog on the road twice at UTEP and at La Tech. We don't know what's happening with the coaching situation there, but still, that's going to be tough to get over. And then you have a home game against FIU that could be winnable. I'm not sure because your defense has what might be the worst secondary in the conference, and that's exactly where FIU is going to want to attack you. So it is a really tough schedule for them to come into. Much like Sam Houston, they held a lot of guys back. They redshirted a lot of guys to come in and try to play. There was some limited action. I think their quarterback, Davis Bryson's going to be there. There's other players, Michael Benefield, Gabriel Bernard at wide receiver, guard Ethan Newman. I mean, they have some pieces that have been good for them. But I go back to the fact that, I just don't think you can go from being a triple option for 9 years of your existence, all under Brian Bohanna, by the way, the head coach, and then just last year go ahead and say, well, I'm going to redshirt the entire team, and I'm going to move us from triple to a pro-style pistol. So these players that didn't get to play just kind of practice in the system. Are they going to be ready for this, at a live level in a conference upgrade? I'm not really sure about that. Like I said, the secondary is in big trouble for any team that wants to pass against them. And then you go and look at who they want to play. Like I said, FIU, Keon Jenkins is going to want to get into this backfield. La Tech can't protect a quarterback, can't really throw deep, but we'll see. I think under 2.5 is definitely the play. I projected at 2.0. Welcome the Owls to Conference USA, but I think this is still a work in progress. Even if they've been in Conference USA last year, I still think this is a work in progress because this is probably the worst quarterback and worst wide receiver group that is in the conference.
All right, we go from the bottom of one conference to two teams that don't have conferences at all. The lone independents outside of Notre Dame, that's UMass and UConn. We'll start with the Minutemen, 3-9 last year. Don Brown on year 8 as their head coach overall. This is his second stint with UMass. He's been here since 2022 in the second go-around. Their win total set at 3.5, 300-1 to make the college football playoff. 6th year of college football action for Tyson Pumachan. He flashes and then he disappoints. After a great opener against New Mexico State, which, I mean, talk about a turnaround for New Mexico State. When they lost to UMass, Stuckey would not let me hear the end of it. After that, though, Pumachan, pretty awful last year. Offensive line needs to be rebuilt, and his top weapon, Kayron Adams, is off to Michigan State to serve as a backup running back after over 1,100 yards rushing and 12 TDs last season. Now, Shane Montgomery in as the OC. He likes to focus on one running back and one wide receiver. The running back room is thin, but Anthony Simpson is back at wide receiver, as is former Clemson Tiger Frank Ladson. Here's where, if I need to talk myself into some optimism, if Ahmad Haston gets a chance at quarterback, I'm more interested in UMass. He's a former 3-star. He got limited action without burning his red shirt last season. I could see this offense surprising a bit if they move away from Pumachan. Defense gave up almost 38 points per game last year. I know that Don Brown comes from a rich tradition of calling some great defenses, Dr. Blitz, getting after people. It's just not there. I guess he just does not have the schematic wizardry to be able to make up for the lack of athletes on his starting defense. The secondary has experience, but they have to fix the run defense, which gave up 220 rushing yards per game. It's just horrific. The schedule, let's look at possible wins. If everything goes right, Eastern Michigan at Buffalo, certainly Central Connecticut State, Wagner. So you get 2 FCS teams and then UConn. But at 3.5, basically, I need 2 wins between Eastern at Buffalo and UConn. Like I said, if Haston gets put in, then all of a sudden I'm more interested on a week-by-week basis to take the points just because it's something new. I know exactly what I'm getting from Pumachan. I'll go to you first, Colin. I know this isn't a team that you race to the window necessarily to bet every single week like Stuckey did at times last year, but where are you on the Minutemen?
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to take a season win total. I project them just over that 3.5 that they have out there. And when you look at the schedule, it's just too many coin flips. Like, you're going to give them the Wagner game. They should be favorites by 29 points off of a bye week. Way to use your one bye week against Wagner. Could have come in a better spot. But, you're going to need 2 weeks off after Missouri comes to Amherst. Like, how I still think we're all asking, like, how an AD agreed for Missouri to go do that. Like, what's the payout? Does Missouri get paid to do that? So anyways, but UMass, they have the 2 games that they need from a coin flip perspective. Buffalo, well, they're going to be on back-to-back travel from Toledo. UMass will be going into Buffalo, so that's a bad scenario. They start off with Eastern Michigan at the start of the year. That's a complete coin flip game. And then at the very end of the season, UConn comes off back-to-back travel to come to play UMass. But there's just too many within 3-point projection field goal games against UConn, Eastern Michigan, Buffalo. It's just too many when you consider Wagner's a win. So I am staying away from this team completely while they scrape the money playing Missouri, who else? Mississippi State, Georgia. Yeah. UMass is somehow split between the MAC and the SEC. They should just have an entry in both.
I have no real feelings on UMass. I'll be honest. I completely forgot to be prep on them. But yeah, I don't have a take. I'm still not playing in a UMass over. You look at, I don't know how Pumachan is still there. I feel like he's been, because didn't he start at Clemson? I feel like he's been in college football for like 9 years.
He did 6 years of college football for him.
Yeah, obviously I'm gonna need them to lose the last game of the year for my win total over. So we'll transition into that one.
All right, let's look at the UConn Huskies. 3-9 last year, going into year 3 of Jim Mora. Their win total set at 4.5, 300-1 should be 3,000-1, 3 million-1 doesn't matter. Huskies are not going to be competing with the likes of Georgia and Ohio State in the college football playoff. Let's start with the offense. Negative 5.5 in the TARP. Interior line is a rebuild. New full-time starter at quarterback, likely Joe Fagnano, who has experience. He got hurt last year, so not coming in, absolutely bare, but obviously you would like a better situation in your quarterback room. Running back room has experience. Receivers, TJ Sheffield from Purdue and Skylar Bell from Wisconsin. do offer upside if the quarterback can get protection this year. Defense took a big step back last year, especially against the pass. Only one returning starter in the secondary. Let's look at a tiny bit of reasons for optimism. Yes, 3-9 was a gut punch off of a competitive year in year one with Jim Mora, but let's look at some of the losses. 10-point loss to NC State, touchdown loss to FIU, 1-point loss to Utah State, 3-point loss to South Florida, 7-point loss to BC, and they upset Rice on the road. So, I mean, if things go a little bit differently, they probably get to 5 wins last year. I think that puts them in a totally different light. And when you look at the winnable games on the schedule, Merrimack, FAU, Buffalo, Temple, Rice, Georgia State, at UAB, at UMass, I wouldn't be shocked if they won, let's say, 5 of those games. There's a chance if everything works offensively. I really like what they did in the portal at wide receiver. So if they get a little bit better in that regard, I don't know, Jim Moore is one of those coaches that surprised me in year one. I think they were snake bit a bit last year. So if I was forced to go with the win total here, which I'm not going to play, but I would go over the 4.5. They're not going to be outclassed in a whole bunch of these games, and almost all of them are at home, all these coin flip games. So that's it for me on UConn. That's as much optimism as I can squeeze out of the rag here for the Independents. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I don't see any way that they're getting over this win total. When you look at the projected spreads that they're coming around, I mean, they're going to be an underdog to Florida Atlantic at home. After that, you finally get your first favorite spot against Buffalo, who's on back-to-back. Let's say that they win that. Then they're going to be favored over Temple. I think Temple is the worst team in FBS football. So sure, there could be 2 wins right there, 3-0 at best against those 3 teams. And then when you go down, you're going to be a touchdown underdog to Georgia State. And then the all-important UMass game at the end. But you have to have all of these. And where you're a short dog, short fave, or the coin flip at the end. And we're talking about mid-average FBS returning production here, 74% on offense, 70% on offense, 65%. They were horrific in defensive success rate. I don't see any improvement that with some of the pieces that they've got in. There's nothing on the schedule, and there's nothing with this team, with what they have at certain positions, that says that they're going to be able to compete here. So I project them 3.8. I am not running out to throw money on them whatsoever.
I'll run out and throw the over. And yeah, I'll be honest, is part of this just I'm from Connecticut and love my Huskies, back-to-back national champions, and would blindly bet they're over regardless? Sure. But if you want me to make a compelling argument, here you go. I liked what I saw from Joey Fagnano in the first game against NC State. You mentioned they played him close because he looked awesome. He's more mobile than people think. He's got a little swagger to him. He got hurt. I will say the one concern I have is he transferred in from Fordham along with offensive coordinator Nick Charlton, who now left for the Cleveland Browns. So him coming in was part of the pairing with the coordinator. Doesn't have the coordinator. That's a slight concern. The running game's always good. Victor Rose is coming back. He had 14 touchdowns in 2 years. He's from Connecticut, hometown guy. By the way, if we do have an injury with Fagnano again, Nick Evers transferred in from Wisconsin at the end of the spring portal, so that gives them a little more depth, especially with Zion Turner leaving. But you mentioned it. They lose Jackson Mitchell to the NFL. That's obviously a big loss. Justin Jolly goes to NC State tight end. They brought in Jim Mora is doing work in the transfer portal. They must be shipping pizza up from New Haven on these portal visits because they bring in Skylar Bell from Wisconsin, TJ Sheffield from Purdue, Shamari Porter from Kentucky, Josiah Gathings is another receiver. Akron's leading receiver comes in. Look at the defensive side of the ball. Julian Simon from Tulsa. He was a 4-star defensive tackle prospect. They bring in a corner from Kansas State. They bring in a DN from Miami. They bring in an edge rusher from Georgia Tech, another D lineman from Kansas State. They're bringing guys from all over the country to Connecticut. A lot of Power 5 drop downs. And sure, they're probably just not talented enough to play at the Power 5 level. But I think this is an injection of talent that's going to boost what we saw from them last year, especially at the wide receiver position. If Fagnano stays healthy and he can get these guys the ball. And you mentioned the schedule. I'm kind of differing opinion than Colin, where, the Merrimack game, Florida Atlantic, Buffalo, Temple. I like Rice, but Georgia State, who we talked about on our last pod, I don't think they're going to be very good, And then UMass, other than the UMass game, all those other games are at home. So all their winnable games are at home. Look, you don't just come into the rent and push UConn around. You think Georgia State wants to come up to Hartford, Connecticut in November? No. You think UAB's on the road. But so, I mean, UMass will basically be a home game for UConn anyway. So I think there is 5 or 6 winnable. I think this team can go bowling. I think there is 5 winnable games here, and they're all at home. So absolutely give me the over on UConn. It is Joey Fagnano season. Breeze, you said I don't have to bet this. Well, yeah, you do, because we're partners in this, and you have to be a loyal and supportive co-host, and you're going to bet UConn with me. So go Huskies. We're going back to back in college basketball, and now we're making a bowl in football.
An hour and 20 minutes in, and your hottest take comes out. I appreciate the energy. And at this point, I feel like anything's possible for this college football season because we just did the hardest work. We made Conference USA compelling. We got lots of plays. And let's close it out with this. I want to go quick round table. Who you got in the Conference USA title game? Who you got winning it? And what is your favorite win total? I'll start with you, Colin.
I'm going to go Liberty over Sam Houston in the conference championship. Have to have a very large hedge room for that. So just keep in mind, you need to have 20 to 1 or better on any team that you're going to have join Liberty from a conference futures perspective. I'm going to go La Tech under 5. The writing's on the wall there with Sonny Cumbie. The roster we mentioned, this is how you get fired. I think Sonny's already got a foot out the door. There's just too much going on here, and I only have them favored in 2 games over Nichols and UTEP, and only 1 coin flip against Kennesaw State. La Tech under 5, best bet for me.
Yep, La Tech under 5 is also my best bet. For the conference title game, obviously, I'm going to go Liberty over. Let's see, Sam, you want to get weird with this? Let's go Liberty over Middle Tennessee. Let's Derek Mason gets hot late in the year and gets the boys from Murfreesboro to the CUSA title game. Let's get weird with it. Why not? What do you got to lose? Except your money.
We got 3 different title game matchups. I'm going to go Liberty over Jacksonville State, but a triple under on La Tech. That's all of our favorite picks. I love, it was already my favorite one, top 2 on the board, but then you dropped in that nugget, Colin, about the AD. That is enough for me. I feel like the pressure, the locker room vibes, just their issues at quarterback, it's not going to be enough for the Bulldogs to stabilize and pull out of this nosedive. Back-to-back 3-9 seasons. I see another one on tap and a pink slip for Sonny Cumbie. For Colin Wilson and Mike Iannello, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the Group of 5 Deep Dive under the Big Bets on Campus banner presented by BetMGM. Can't wait to deliver more in conference preview season. Conference USA and the Independents now in the books. And a reminder that you're going to be able to hear that other independent, Notre Dame, in the ACC preview from Colin and Stuck. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy preview season.